to feel about this show now. I see someone saying their freshman year of high school was 1999. Addison says that's his birth year. Oh, so old. Greetings. I'm your host, Jason Miles, and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast for all the returning listeners, subscribers, and our very valued patrons. Thank you so much for coming back. To those new to the channel, thank you for taking a moment to check us out. If you dig what we're doing, please hit like and, of course, subscribe. It goes a very long way in promoting the channel. Quick reminder before I bring the guest in, TIR is a listener-supported program. Without y'all, we couldn't do this. If you enjoy what we do here on TIR and have the means and feel so inclined, become a patron for as little as $3 a month or $30 for the year. You can access our patron-only champagne rooms. Join us for movie nights, which we're doing tonight. Oh, yes. I got my cherry Dr. Pepper, chocolate-covered raisins. I don't care what you people say. And I'm ready to watch Enter the Ninja. Woo! Also, when you're a patron, you get access to the TIR Discord, and you get the satisfaction of knowing that you help contribute to the insanity. That is TIR. Also, we'll be back on Saturday. We'll be doing something a bit different then. JG and I will be joined in the cheap seats with Ben Burgess, where we'll be discussing Nightmare on Elm Street 5. But after the show, we're going to have a watch party. Oh, yeah. We'll watch Nightmare Part 5, and you can see for yourselves if you think, like JG, that it is actually better than everyone's beloved favorite, Dream Warriors. Now, with that out of the way, let's talk 1999. 1999 for many is a memorable year, but I don't think it is viewed or respected in the same historical way that we view 1968 or 1969. There was a Woodstock in 1999, but it was marred in tragedy and destruction. Many in the media said in the wake of the disaster of Woodstock 99 that this was a cultural flaw of disaffected youth that were hypnotized by the low-tuned, angsty sounds of nu metal. The proto-podcast was the daytime talk show. It was then known as trash television. These weren't elevated conversations on domestic and international affairs. They were a parade of poverty-stricken tales of deceit, some even leading to murder. We tuned in for it all. Soap operas and game shows were becoming a thing of the past as we wanted to see more poor people perform for our judgmental gaze. Before the stock market would crash, the Beanie Baby market would take a fantastic dive before our eyes. What do these two things have in common when it comes to our capitalistic lust to cash in on every aspect of our lives, even our playful, childlike joy? Lastly, kayfabe took center stage as pro wrestling would outpace other professional sports as some of the most watched television shows. By 1999, we were done with the hyperbolic good guy versus bad guy Cold War narratives. This was the attitude era of the anti-hero. How did the rise of pro wrestling infect the political sphere to the point where we have wrestling royalty in office? We'll discuss it all with the author and journalist of the book 1999, the low culture conquered America, the year low culture conquered America and kickstarted our bizarre times. Wherever you are watching or listening to the show, there's a link in the description to get the book. I recommend this book. It is a page frickin' turner. Please welcome Ross Bennis.
Love the applause.
Was that the best intro you've ever gotten?
That's the best intro I've ever had. Most excited I've ever had someone to have me on.
Well, it was, look, I think you were on a friend's show, I think, or he read your book, JG Michael, who we have a fun show that JG and I do called Dudes in the Cheap Seats, where we talk about low budget films. We're both big fans of low budget movies. You sounds like you grew up in the heyday. I don't know how much of the heyday you got to watch as a very small child of Cinemax and Showtime. And for me, I was babysat by those things because my mother worked nights. and we had like this bootleg cable, so I only had like 4 channels, and 2 of them were Cinemax and Showtime.
Watching a lot of Skinemax then, weren't
I
you?
watched a lot of action movies with boobs.
Yeah, that's good stuff for a young boy.
Yeah, that's why I'm single now.
Yeah, I've been on JG's show twice now. I actually connected with him originally because we both had interest in the Satanic Panic, and I was loosely related to this guy that was involved in a version of that in Nebraska that took place in the late 80s and early 90s. And I talked to him about my other book at the time, and then we connected for this low culture thing because I think we all have an appreciation of the trashy aspects of our culture.
Yes, I appreciate that about JG, because I'm the same way. I don't have guilty pleasures. I don't really believe in them. Just
Yeah, they're not guilty; they're just pleasures.
Yeah, just dig what you dig. You know, you can't make
totally.
me feel bad. You can't make me. You can try to make me feel bad about liking certain stuff. It's like, man, I wear no shirts ironically.
Yeah, same here. This NWO shirt, I love this shit. Like,
I mean, you saw. I sent you episode 1 of Kayfabe. That is, I love wrestling. I think it's fun.
Well, clearly, you had a lot of moments in your mind that you were able to pull up for that. Like, you had to be familiar with the medium to make that happen.
Yes. But you look at 1999, which I found just the title. I was like, why is this cat looking at 90? So I had to go back to 1999. And the first thing I thought about 1999 was because I was working at that time. I was a dad in 99. And it was the failure of 2000. What was going to happen in 2000? Your credit cards weren't going to work. Your computers were going to crash. Airplanes were going to fly into buildings. I mean, that happened sadly a few years later. But 1999 was going to be the last year before we were going to live in the Back to the Future Part 2 future. And it hasn't happened yet. You were about, what, 9 in 99?
Yep, that's right.
Were you expecting the same future in 2000?
It just felt like I lived in rural Nebraska at the time. So to give you a sense, I'm from a town of 300 people. I lived there for the first 19 years of my life. I had no internet until I was a junior in high school. And I just felt like a lot of this stuff wouldn't affect us. Like, that was just kind of our attitude, whether it was like Y2K, later on the Great Recession. We're just kind of like, we're just backwater people who are disconnected from what happens on the coast. You know, if something big's going to happen, maybe it'll eventually get to us, but we're not too worried about Y2K. I just watched MTV with my nephews who are about my age on New Year's Eve that night. There was no panic or anything like that.
That's so funny. I've spent a fair amount of time in your fair state of Nebraska touring. An uncomfortable amount of time in Nebraska.
An uncomfortable, wow.
Yeah. Like, I'm like, oh, I know where I am. Ross, you make the argument that 1999 was the year low culture took over America. What does low culture mean in this context?
So it's basically the pop culture that's the most mocked or derided. So like Jerry Springer would be a prime example of low culture. TV Guide said that it was the worst show of all time. There were a lot of people trying to censor the show or even get it booted off the air. The Insane Clown Posse is in the book. Blender Magazine said that they are the worst band of all time. USA Today said that they had the worst album of 1999. So the stuff that's in there is, you know, pro wrestling, porn, Beanie Babies. It's the stuff that, like, if you tell people you're a fan, they kind of like joke and, oh, you like that? You know, like, that's low culture to me, but it's very much in the eye of the beholder. And a perfect example of that being the eye of the beholder is I have a long chapter on video games because in 1999, when video games were blamed for the Columbine massacre, they were very much low culture at that time, the way that they were presented in media. But 25 years later, like, The Last of Us is winning awards and the Super Mario Brothers movie is, like, you know, breaking box office records, and video games make more money than music and film and books combined. Clearly things have changed a lot, but, you know, I'm writing about what was low culture in 1999.
Why do you think that is? Because look, as a person that was playing video games as a young person in 1982 with Atari, and then running to an arcade anytime, you know, we had a couple quarters on us, wherever there was arcade games to play in my neighborhood in Richmond, California. It feels like it's taken a long time for the video game to really infiltrate. And I wonder if you think it has something to do with music and movies being ubiquitous in a way that they never were before. Like even with cable, a new movie on cable had been out for at least 2 or 3 years before it hit cable. With VHS, a movie had been out for a while before it hit VHS. With video games now, it seems like it's something that most young people do, and that's what they do. Like we played video games a lot back in the day. I'm sure you played video games a lot back in the day.
I played a ton of video games.
There were professional video game players in the 80s. Like we have to remember that this is not a new phenomenon, but we did other stuff. We rode our bikes. We tried to jump off stairs we had no business jumping off of, and threw rocks at cars, all the horrible things that children do. What is it about video games now you think that makes them so much more I don't want to say acceptable, but acceptable? Because like you said, there was a Mario movie, I forget what year that was.
That was just like 2-3 years ago.
No, there was a Mario
movie. The one in the 80s. Yeah, that one.
The 90s rather, the 90s.
Or 90s. Yeah, that didn't have John Leguizamo.
John Leguizamo was in it, yeah. And Dennis Hopper playing King Koopa. What is the difference between now and then, in your opinion?
Yeah, so video games went through what basically every other entertainment format had gone through, and that's when they are a hobbyist pursuit among young people, like they were in the 80s and 90s. They are mocked and scorned and blamed for societal ills committed by juveniles. So video games in the early 90s were the average gamer age was like in their early 20s. So there's congressional hearings in 1993 on video game violence, and they're talking about Mortal Kombat and in this niche game called Night Trap. And it's all being misrepresented, and the clips are shown out of context. But there's interesting comments made by this executive of Sega. And he said that the average age of video gamers is growing because the medium is expanding, and it's now in the early 20s. And the Nintendo guy starts shouting him down and saying, gamers aren't getting older. This is for children, because that's like how Nintendo marketed their product. But the Sega guy was totally telling the truth. 22 at 1993 was a growth from the 80s when the average gamer was in their teens. But by 2010, the average age of a gamer is in their 30s. Now it's about 35 years old. So as a medium has older users, that means that it has much greater mass adoption. And the people who are older have familiarity with it. And it's harder when there's a mass familiarity with the medium to demonize it in the way that video games were demonized in the 80s and 90s. They grew up because the kids who played video games didn't stop playing them when they became adults. They played them with their kids. And a new generation came up, but like you have people now that are like in their 40s and 50s been playing games their whole life. That wasn't the case in the 80s and the 90s. And like that's why when you're 50 years old and you grew up playing video games, you're gonna have a way different outlook on it than 50-year-olds had in 1993 who like are going, what the hell is Super Nintendo that my kid is playing? It's much different outlook on it. And that's why like when a mass shooting happens now, very rarely is the pin on video games. Like in the 90s, especially Columbine and like the 10 years after that, they were the culprit all the time. Like they were the scapegoat all the time.
It is, and I think that was just following up, speaking of the Satanic Panic. I don't know if you read this. Is his name Richard Beck?
Yep. Believe the Children.
Believe the Children.
Yep, I read that.
Book. Great book. JG and I also talk a lot of Satanic Panic stuff because, again, I was around during that time, and it was a real thing where, you come home from daycare, your mom's like, "Hey, what happened?"
By the way, do you address the comments as they come up?
Sometimes. Okay,
because I saw someone mention the game Doom, and that's exactly that was the game in 1999 that was blamed.
Games had gotten better. Again,
Doom was made in 94, though. I mean, 93, 94. So.
But, let's just go back in the Wayback Machine and think about the games that were extremely popular in the 80s. And we're talking Pac-Man, bit graphics. It wasn't that great. Even if you go back and look at some of the early Nintendo stuff, these graphics weren't that great. By the time you get to the computer stuff and even Doom, and again, I'm not saying I'm justifying people blaming video games because that's insane. People are going to blame something, like Judas Priest was on trial.
Oh yeah, before video games, it was heavy metal, and before that, it was jazz and radio and the printed novel, and like every entertainment form has had this phenomenon happen to them.
But I still blame rap music. Blame it for everything because I'm racist.
Blame it for the good things too, right?
What did daytime talk shows of the 90s teach us about American voyeurism and the demand for spectacle?
That people love it. Like Jerry Springer tried to talk to Jesse Jackson, Oliver North, and no one gave a shit. And then he's like, why don't we have like pregnant strippers and guys who castrated themselves on? And people were like, oh yeah, I want that. Like Jerry. And I wanted that. I watched it with my parents. Like it was awesome. But
I like the fact that you bring up that some of those shows came on at night.
Yeah, they call it daytime, but it's up to the affiliate when they want to air it. And sometimes they had a double airing. They would air it at noon, and they would air it again at 9 o'clock. So yeah, a lot of that viewing is happening at nighttime. That's when you get the best TNA. But with Jerry Springer shows and the shows like it, there's a dozen of them at the 90s, maybe more. Americans like the shock and sensation, and there's a lot of power there to be had just in keeping people entertained, even if you're not offering them some substance at all. So like that shock and outrage that Springer popularized morphed into reality TV and morphed into the White House eventually.
Yeah. How do you think the lessons are visible in current political or online behavior with what we saw in the 90s in talk shows?
Oh God. I mean, just online spats between people on social media are a lot like Springer segments and politics. Like think of Trump dressing down Zelensky, and that was more like a Jerry Springer, Ricky Lake argument than it was like a diplomatic episode. Combative style of discussion is very popular. People are engaged with it, and because people like to view it, the practitioners of it are varied now. They aren't just daytime talk shows.
You didn't mention this unless I missed it in that chapter, Morton Downey Jr. And I don't know if that was just a little before your time, but for my dollar, Morton Downey Jr. fascinated me as a young person, and he really fascinates me as an older person. He wasn't on TV very long, maybe a year or two, but
he's kind of the proto.
Yeah, he really is, and more so, he was having more I would political discussions. we'll call them that, because there wasn't the strippers and there wasn't
kind of like a raving madman though.
But he was to the right of libertarians, but he had an audience full of young people. And the reason why, for me, the talk show chapter in the book really resonated with me is because I did a video essay that's available on Means TV. And if you use the code "This is Revolution," all one word, you can receive 20% out discount on Means TV membership. Means TV, called "We Don't Need Another Hero." And there was some hero worship in people like Jerry Springer and Morton Downey, not so much in Ricky Lake, not so much in Sally Jesse, and definitely not so much in Jenny Jones. Everyone aspired to be these people, but if you wrote a chapter on Insane Clown Posse and how they did things similar to the Catholic Church. In the talk show world, to me, the Catholic Church is Oprah Winfrey. She tried for a little bit to do some trashy stuff, but she became the serious conversation for heartfelt talk, right? She became America's Mammy. And everyone liked that. With Jerry Springer, he became America's cool uncle that let you drink beer when you're underage.
It's more like snort speed.
Yeah, and eventually he teaches you how to do a titty bump with a stripper. So it was always been fascinating to me to see how people kind of glommed on to him and what he was able to do, or that show was able to do, with this parade of poor people that we got to make fun of. Because at the same time that's going on, there's the acceptance of an underclass ideology that says these poor people are born broken. And that's why they need to be locked up for long periods of time. That's why we need to cut their welfare, because they're just pieces of shit. And while politically Clinton's saying this, Jerry Springer at the same time, and I don't think it's an effort that was done with the White House in conjunction with Springer. I think these things are just happening at the same time. But while that's going on, he's parading these same poor people in front of America, and they go, that's why I don't feel bad about you losing your benefits. That's why I don't feel bad you're getting locked up for long periods of time, because you people are unrepentant pieces of shit.
But Jerry Springer, to his credit, the poor people watched his show more than they watched Oprah. Oprah was more popular with like white middle class than Springer was. Springer was more popular with poor whites and with black audiences. So like, while that may have been his guess, that was also his audience. His audience seemed to be into that.
I think as a fellow poor person.
Yeah. My parents lived in a trailer park before I was born. So we were the Springer, audience as much as like we were the kin that would be on there,
It was, look, I'd be lying if I said I didn't watch an insane amount of those shows. I was the kid that could tell you what time it is by what was on television. But, going back and watching some of that as an adult, understanding the times where it's happening, it felt real easy for the pushback to happen. I mean, hip hop does the same thing, right? There's contradictions within hip hop all the time, and they seem to try to look, oh, well, we're just reporters of the street news that doesn't get told on TV. It's like, that's not true, because I watch TV and see Negroes on there all the time doing bad shit. So I don't need you telling me what the news is already telling me. I mean, do you feel like Jerry Springer took advantage of poor people a little bit?
Well, there's definitely some unethical stuff that happens in how the show is produced. Some guests are deceived, but they're also like, some of them are so. I've watched a few documentaries about it and read books about Jerry Springer. I mean, some of the guests are so gullible, and like, I don't know, people have free will at the end of the day to go or not go on that show. That I don't know how anyone thought Jerry Springer was going to help them. Like these guests would go and call his number and think like, Jerry Springer is going to help me with this like love pentagon I'm in. You know what I mean? Like, no, he's not going to fucking help you. He's going to like just have you on and present how messed up your life is. And then like everyone's going to forget about you in 10 minutes because there's 4,000 episodes of the Jerry Springer show. You'll never be in touch with the producers, but they like had this idea of him in his head, and the producers did not, I guess, try to speak, reality to them when they would be pitching themselves. They would be hyping them up. Like, you got to go on there and fight your sister. You know what I mean?
You brought up Geraldo in that chapter, and Geraldo's an important character. And also, bless you for bringing up the vaults. I watched the vaults. I asked my mom, I was like, can I stay up late and watch Al Capone's vaults? And my mom didn't give a shit what I was doing. I said, okay, yeah, can you shut the fuck up when you do it? And I was sitting there like this, and you're right. I don't know if you went back and watched it.
I watched it, yeah.
But the only thing I was mildly sad you didn't mention about Geraldo was that years before the vaults, he broke the story that shut down a mental hospital for maltreatment of their patients. If you've ever seen the show American Horror Story, the second season, there's a character who's a news journalist, and she breaks back into this asylum. That episode is scene for scene, word for word, what Geraldo did. I can't remember the name of it's upstate New York.
Yeah, it was in New York. Yeah,
it was in upstate New York. I was like, he didn't mention
Well, Geraldo is a lot like Springer in that regard. Like
Yeah.
Springer won Peabody Awards, but like after his time as a Cincinnati mayor and Cincinnati councilman, he's like a serious broadcast journalist in Ohio before he becomes like the Jerry Springer that we know. Geraldo Rivera, like he had a legitimate journalism career before, like, he did the vaults, and then he had like neo-Nazis getting in fistfights on his stage.
Yeah.
Like, they both took a crazy U-turn, and you're right. That's a omission on my part. But yeah, he's not the first person to follow this path of like, I'm doing serious, important work. You know what? Let's scrap that. I'm just gonna host a freak show.
I mean, look, the money, everything changed, right? And we have to kind of acknowledge, I don't know how you feel about this. Once the journalist becomes the news reader, right? Once it's not the guy out there actually breaking the story, it's just Mike Wallace reading the news. It's Walter Cronkite. And that's how we're going to view journalism, as these well put together failed actors. All bets are off for how we view journalism moving forward.
Yeah, this is like the part in your documentary talk about the kayfabe being with the fairness doctrine, right?
Yeah. Once we get into this world, I think all bets are kind of off on how we understand news. And I think by the time Geraldo is kind of coming into his own, Sally Jesse was the same way. She was like a real news person for a long time. There was no money in that, and news departments are shuttering at the same time. And also, as the big three networks are selling to these big multinational corporations, they're cutting these budgets that used to exist for years, where there were just documentaries about stuff. Like, how do racist white people feel about black people getting the right to vote? I don't know. You want to go make a movie about it? Here's a bunch of money. Go do that. They weren't doing it. By the time those guys were like in newsrooms and they wanted to go do real news, there was no more money for that. But if they could get eyeballs on the screen with Al Capone's vaults, with I'll get the black nationalists and Jew hating white supremacists together. What could go wrong?
And everyone watched it. Like, that's the most famous thing Geraldo did on his show.
I watched the show.
Yeah. It was like real life pro wrestling.
Pro wrestling, and it had already infected, but it didn't really have the character play that you talk about in the 90s, which I think is really important. But, kind of just staying with the Geraldo thing, you can't do that every week, though.
Yeah, that momentum is hard to maintain.
Jerry found a way, and no one else could do this. Every week, I can parade a different version of the same thing out that no one else could do. Jenny Jones couldn't do all the makeovers. Ricky Lake couldn't do the look at me nows every week. You just can't do that every week.
Maury had the paternity test for a long time. That was his
20 some odd years.
Yeah.
20, 30 some odd years he did paternity. That's something that you can do every week, even though as the viewer, we can go into pro wrestling, because this is kind of where that comes in. As the viewer, this person is lying. There's no way. I have a wayward penis. I've shot my fair share of out there loads. That being said, I only have 4 kids. Right? Like, I refuse to believe there's a woman around here, like, 6 guys come on the show. I don't know. Like, how many people were coming in you? Like, in that week? Like, Jesus Christ, lady.
Yeah, it's a specific amount of time that you're looking at here.
Yeah.
You need a police lineup, though.
Rashad is not the father.
I always like the reactions of like the whether he is the father or isn't, just like the guy fist pumping or like he's crying. It's good TV.
He does a whole breakdance routine in front of her. But this is for me where pro wrestling and kayfabe is really important. I don't know if you feel the same way about this as a wrestling fan. We all know wrestling's fake, right? It's not about the matches. It's about the storylines. In the 80s, the storylines were extremely generic. By the 90s, they really get personal. And for kayfabe to work, sometimes you have to see how the sausage is made, or you think you're seeing how the sausage is made. And there's this moment in wrestling, and I feel like you know this moment, the Montreal Screwjob.
Oh yeah, that's super famous moment.
To me, that's the pivot moment for wrestling, politics, talk shows, America. Because this thing that for my grandfather's
Is it because we're fucking over Canada in that situation?
The 51st state.
Yeah.
There's no way we're gonna let Bret Michaels be in the champ. I think it's because you see something that you've never seen before. Number one, you see, and I do think it's all a work. I do not believe that was all random. I'm on Team Scott Hall. Those shots of Bret Michaels spitting on Vince McMahon, him doing
Bret Hart, you mean?
Bret Hart, sorry. Bret Hart.
Shawn Michaels was the adversary.
Bret Michaels is lead singer of Poison.
Yep.
But all that stuff you see, I even think Vince McMahon took a real punch.
He did. He had a fucking there's a documentary with Wrestling with Shadows.
I think that's all part of it because these are guys. The Hart family for like 4.5 months had fooled their own mother, Owen and Bret, into thinking they were really feuding. Their own mom. Like, these are guys that grew up in a serious wrestling family. They took kayfabe very seriously. And I think that can only work. I don't think everybody knew about it. I'm sure only a small amount of people knew about it. But that kind of thing can only work if a small handful of people know about it. But showing how the sausage is made, let people think I'm in on it too. And then the storylines just got crazier and more ridiculous. And Trump got involved in wrestling.
Well, Trump was involved even before that, and then he got involved again because like he hosts his casino hosts WrestleMania. I don't know if it's 6 or 7. Montreal Screwjob is like 97. So yeah, Trump was already a fixture in pro wrestling at that point. But then like he comes back and has the battle of the billionaires and all that shit, and he fake purchases the company. But the Montreal Screwjob, what you're kind of getting at here is when they ended the facade and they said, this is fake, this is all scripted. People were more intrigued after that. Like that was a promotion. And you wanted to tune in to see like, oh, like when are they going to shoot? Like when are they going to really go off on them? Like when Vince Russo goes off on Hulk Hogan, Bash at the Beach, just calling him a piece of shit in the ring and like just dogging him so hardcore. Fans were like waiting for those moments and just, the figuring out what is real and what isn't is like the most fun part of it.
It's the whole thing I've found so fascinating because this is also, people still think Vince McMahon's just a ringside announcer.
Who still thinks that?
I mean, at that time. I'm sorry.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I was like, who the fuck thinks that? Okay.
No, he's shitting on people that, literally.
Yeah.
So the pivot from ringside announcer to the head of the evil empire to
it's
the
genius,
attitude.
Really.
Say again?
It's genius. Like the storytelling and planning that all out. For how big of a piece of shit he is personally, like he scripted that incredibly well.
That's why that moment for me is so important in the way we think about even kayfabe, because you do have to, it's not all magician's tricks. Sometimes you have to be like, no, this is how I made the quarter come out of your ear. But I'm going to now make a building disappear, and you're not going to know how that happened. And I get to do more of these goofy tricks. But it's that moment was just a mind blower for me. I've watched that Dark Side of the Ring documentary on that episode a million times. I've read everything I could find on the Montreal Screwjob. It's just like you said, it's genius because of the pivot the entire industry makes around that time to really double down on, we are going to be the HBO of sports. And you talk about this in your book, how WCW, which, I mean, I'm sure you believe, I don't know, do you believe that Vince McMahon just totally sabotaged Eric Bischoff?
Well, WCW did a lot of self-sabotage, and they kind of dug their own graves. You know, Vince McMahon probably could have done more with that brand after he bought it, but he'd rather, you know, piss on the tombstone of his competitors than elevate it. But as far as McMahon sabotaging, what is interesting though is the revisionism that WWE presents, because McMahon was obsessed with what Eric Bischoff was doing. I mean, they had multiple lawsuits against Scott Hall for him being too close of likeness to Razor Ramon, the WWE character, and like they had to settle out of court. And McMahon is like, you know, out there making these skits, mocking Ted Turner, mocking Bischoff. And then like in the WWE documentary, they would say WCW was so focused on WWE, but WWE didn't care about its competitors. If Vince comes on and he's like, I just think you got to care about yourself and, you know, focus on your own business. But it's like completely reversed of what he actually did at the time. Like he sued WCW to try to prevent Ultimate Warrior from appearing. And then like years later, he says, well, Ultimate Warrior was like, we never wanted him. You know, we're glad he went to WCW. He helped take the company. Like they just totally twist what they say, like complete historical revisionism.
And can I say, if you guys want to get a really good, there's some decent stuff on kayfabe out there. If you're just a wrestling fan, buy Ross's book just for his chapter on kayfabe, because there's something that you did, Ross, that I think you need to get your flowers for, as you young people say, and that was your portrayal of the Ultimate Warrior. That poor man got raked over the coals by the WWE, and then there was like this revisionism, and you really talk about that in the book, about how Ultimate Warrior was looked at after he was gone, because he was kind of, I don't want to say a flash in the pan, but it felt like his time was brief. And if you watch certain documentaries, they're like, he was a horrible wrestler, he sucked, he didn't do, he hurt people in the ring and yada yada yada. And you're like, but I was a little kid and we thought Ultimate Warrior was like the coolest, scariest motherfucker alive.
Oh, from parts unknown, and he snarled and he talked about throwing dudes out of the cockpit and during his promos. Weird ass dude. But WWE, so they produced the documentary, The Ultimate Destruction of Warrior, or something like that's the title, and they just shit on him for like 2 hours. And Warrior's not a likable guy. Like he's an actual prick. Like the person, he did a like. He's not a great locker room guy. Like no one actually seems like they like Warrior. So that can all be true. But they make this documentary that just dogs him and how he's a piece of shit. And then he dies. And that documentary is not available to stream anymore. Like you'd have to buy like a old DVD on Amazon if you want to watch it, or you could probably pirate it somewhere. And then they make a new documentary and it's all like Vince McMahon being like, you don't know what you got till it's gone, you know? like this completely flip, and they act like they never made the first one. It's like, what do you know, that's kayfabe. Like you're just presenting some bullshit as if like the thing you previously did didn't even happen. Trump does it like every other week, you know?
You talked about Chris Benoit, which is like, wow. One of the few guys that actually was a good technical wrestler, but killed his family.
Yeah, and they didn't mention it forever. Like, scrubbed him from the website. They scrubbed Vince McMahon from the website now. If you go to WWE.com, type in Vince McMahon, you'll see like Steph and Shane. You'll see Vince McMahon Sr., the guy who owned the territorial WWF.
Yeah.
But the founder, visionary, lead creative force, star heel, like the most important person in modern professional wrestling history, is not to be found on their website. They want you to believe he does not exist because you know, he's a terrible man who's mired in all sorts of lawsuits. That's like the ultimate revisionism they've ever done.
that was insane to me when you wrote that, because I just figured, I feel like the McMahon sex lawsuit has kind of, for the most part, gone under the rug. We did a show about it here, actually, because if you read the complaints, it was insane.
Oh my God, yeah.
I mean, like, oh, that's out there. That's beyond Diddy.
Well,
that is beyond Diddy.
John Laurinaitis is cooperating with the victim now, and he's dropped that he's no longer part of the lawsuit. So there may be more coming.
I do want to talk to you while I have you about music in 1999. I wrote about Woodstock 99 for Sublation magazine because 2 documentaries came out that I had the unpleasure of watching. And there's a narrative that is hippies were decent people and we're all peace and love. And Woodstock went off without a hitch in 69. Not true at all.
Well, people died at the original Woodstock.
People died at the original Woodstock. There was one toilet for about 300,000 people. There was no food because, remember, nothing happened correctly. So the state ended up really helping a riot happen. And one thing that is forgotten in the revisionist history is that 69 and 94, people snuck in. And there was supposed to be no ins and outs in 94. People cut a hole in the fence and there was ins and outs in 94. So despite the horrible conditions in 69 and 94, people got in for free. You're not going to complain as much when you get in for free. 99.
It's like watching Tubi. I can't complain.
Right?
I don't pay for it.
Ad.
What am I going to do?
What am I going to do about it? 99. You can't get out. They figured out how to make a fortress. It's not yet Coachella smart because they don't know how to make it all about commerce. Because another thing people forget about these music festivals, in 69, there's like a stage. It's all about the music. In 94, there's a couple stages. 99, there's a couple stages. By the time you get to stuff like Coachella, there's like 1 million stages. I used to work Coachella. There's tons of stages there. Most music festivals now have tons of stages and tents. There's so much for you to do that isn't watching.
There's sponsors for everything.
Everything. This was still a relatively newer thing by 99. So 99, they just figured out how to lock people in and let Lord of the Flies happen. But I don't think 99 and 69 is that different. And I want to get your opinion. In 69, there was a couple of reported rapes. In 99, there's a couple of reported rapes. And when you tell people the actual number from 99, first thing they say is, there's more. Those women didn't speak out. What the fuck do you think happened in 69 when the pill is brand new and there's an implied yes for all these dudes? Or do we just assume that everybody was just fucking willy-nilly in 69 and 99 for some reason? When all these chicks are that much hotter, they don't want to fuck them. But Woodstock 99, your take on the portrayal of Gen X fucking everything up.
Yeah, so the Woodstock 99 documentaries that came out recently, I found them annoying because it was all like, nu metal is like the devil, and this is like, Fred Durst and all these assholes. They're the ones who caused the riot. Like they put as much or more blame on Fred Durst as they did on like the shitty organizers. Like, people are drinking like water with but like shit in it, literally. You know what I mean? Like the conditions of Woodstock was absolutely horrendous. And those same bands, all those same nu metal bands that are targeted, they played like the Sanitarium tour and Ozfest and like various other tours together and didn't have that combustible set of conditions happen. Yeah. So like, I think there's something unique about Woodstock 99 or Woodstock in general than just like these asshole knucklehead rapper rocker guys like were angry. You know what I mean?
Because nu metal, I think, is part of what you talk about with the low culture. And
for sure. Limp Bizkit is the first scene of the book.
If you think about the lifespans of music post 69, a lot of these genres that sometimes get looked at as the greatest time of music are really short-lived. Disco is really short-lived. Punk is really short-lived. I mean, it still exists, but as the cultural phenomenon it was between like 77 to 81, you don't really have that. You know, I wrote with a friend of mine, Professor Alexander Herbert, and he said on this very show, he's like, well, punk died when the Pistols broke up because so many of those bands went different ways that were inspired by the Pistols. Or we're going to be a punk band, and then the Pistols break up. Like, oh, we'll be a post-punk band. Nu metal doesn't have the longest lifespan, but it comes at the heels of grunge, which is supposed to be the most important music of all time. And at the same time, grunge is hitting its zenith in 94 is when kind of the seminal nu metal records drop. Korn drops its first record. Who else had a nu metal record in 94?
I think Limp Bizkit's a little later with $3 Bill.
I think that's a little later. Deftones is 95, but
System of a Down probably wasn't really.
No, that's like 99.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's still a sound brewing, mainly in Southern California, of this down-tuned thing that's going to be kind of antithetical to what we're getting, because now grunge, which was supposed to be, for some reason, it was supposed to be an alternative to popular rock music. It, you know, again, we were talking about this, they were all on major labels. You know, some of these nu metal bands that we're talking about, they were actually on indies, and they blew up off of indies. Now you are still a young person, but you're captured by this music by 99.
Oh yeah, and I got a crazy story about Limp Bizkit. I just want to share.
Yeah, please.
In 2000, my brother was the starting point guard on the high school basketball team in my town. So it was only like 120 kids that go to this high school, 9 through 12. It's, a very small population. The starting five, it's all like, white dudes that are 6'5" and shorter. Like the center is like 6'5". This is high school. And they were like the Detroit Pistons of the 80s. They were the badasses of the areas. Like they had like a technical foul every game. They fucking threw chairs. They fought with their coach. And the song they came out to in 2000, instead of the pep band, they played the Urban Assault remix of Rollin'. And they played it uncensored. No one could stop the fucking kids. So like the girls' game would end, and then you just hear, "Play that fucking track" by Fred Durst. And they'd run in with their frosted tips like they were badasses. And like we all thought it was so cool at the time. It's just like such a hilarious thing to think about. That's what I think about when I think about Limp Bizkit, is like my brother and his frosted tips looking so stern at like, "Play that fucking track. Everybody rolling, baby."
Would you say that was rebel music for the time?
For them it was, yeah. For those teens at that time, like that was their, that was definitely their rebel music. But like rebel in a way that like it was on TRL every fucking day.
It's weird because it's not, nu metal doesn't really come from the city like everything else. Hip hop, it's city, right? Jazz. Like all this is city stuff, not necessarily California and New York, but cities, right? Nu metal is very comfortable in the suburbs.
Oh, and in the South, and
yeah, and it feels like this is the generation of people that grew up watching MTV, because it's taking so much from the visual element to the point that what they have to do is so visual. We want you to we want you to know our pants are this baggy. We have this jewelry on because we grew up watching hip hop. And we didn't just grow up watching, we appreciate it.
Oh yeah, they had rappers in so many of their songs. They had great collaborations, like with Method Man and other guys. Yeah.
So that whole genre of music being blamed for Woodstock, and I love the fact that you said, well, there's just as many jam bands that played 99. Yeah,
totally. So I think what big difference between Woodstock in the 60s and Woodstock 99 is, like, in the 60s, the image most people have of it isn't the immediate press coverage of it. It's the really well-produced documentary that came out afterwards that, like, it's just like, here's Jimi Hendrix, like looking like a fucking god, playing and like
Playing to nobody.
Yeah.
No one was there.
But it looks awesome in the
Yes.
documentary.
Yeah.
Whereas like Woodstock 99, the image is like MTV is there the whole fucking time broadcasting the shit show. There isn't the equivalent of that. If there was in the 60s, there was this group, I think they were called like Up Against the Wall Motherfuckers or something like that. They burned down a food stand in 69 because they said like it was like we shouldn't have like this capitalistic like sale of commodities at Woodstock, and that like made it harder to fucking feed people.
That's why they had granola and like yogurt or some shit like that.
If that would have happened in 99, like you would have had like the live footage of it on cable news, and people would have been like, oh my God, the horror, which is what they did, when the place is on fire and Red Hot Chili Peppers are playing Fire.
I think they were told not to do that song.
It's so badass that they did it anyways.
Like it's burning. They don't care. Look, I think Woodstock 99 and 69 are extremely similar. And again, I'll say this until the wheels fall off. The only reason why 69 doesn't erupt the same way 99 did was because, what was it? 90% of the people got in for free when they broke the. That's in the movie. And
the band, I like this stuff from the 90s. The bands in Woodstock 69 are more iconic, important bands. Like you have like a who's who of the 60s there.
I think it's the same. Look, I'd say this. I think it's the same thing. I think we look at music is just as important as those people in 69 as it was in 99. I think there's a veneer of importance in the people listening to it that I don't think is real. I think hippies got to be close to movements that were all burgeoning at the time. Yeah. Women's rights, civil rights, Native American rights. All this stuff is happening around the same time. So you're just young, and this is going to sound crass. You want to be where the pussy is. And if the hot chicks are at the rally, it's like that episode of Always Sunny in Philadelphia where
he goes from abortionist to being yeah,
on both sides. It sounds shitty, but go talk to, if you're my age and your parents were hippies, you should go talk to them.
Well, I don't know, but you got like the Who and Jimi Hendrix and like Jefferson Airplane, whose music is still used in all sorts of movies and commercials and like loved by people 60 years later.
Because they had better marketing, Ross. They had better marketing. They had, if you right I
just don't think Limp Bizkit and like Red Hot Chili Peppers are gonna. Well, Red Hot Chili Peppers maybe, but a lot of the bands of Woodstock 99, I don't know if they're gonna get much airplay in 60 years. Like,
let's think who came out in 99. I'm trying to think.
I love the lineup though. I love Chili Peppers. I love Rage Against the Machine played.
Rage Against the Machine is another band that I think is interesting of Woodstock 99.
Was it Jewel there?
Jewel played. Yeah. She was one of those people. Sheryl Crow were one of the people that started. I wouldn't say started, but they really pointed the finger at, Sheryl Crow. Why did this happen? Well, look at the music. I wasn't the one yelling break stuff. It's like, dude.
Well, that was the fucking song. That was the hit. That's the hit song at the time.
But still, it's like you think in 69 there weren't similar type anthems. I mean, people were rocking the fuck out. They were fighting. They were. Oh yeah,
that's what like assaulting. That was the Who sets were always like, we're gonna break all this shit. Like,
oh dude, I got to see the Who play a couple times. Definitely not 69, but I got to see the Who play, and I was blown away by the fact. Because I didn't grow up listening to that music, but I was blown away by the fact that they had that much energy on stage to be that old. I was like, damn. I don't know if it's the cocaine or what, but you guys are doing it. Props to you, fellas. But I look at 69 and 99, and I think just there's this boomer nostalgia that we got bombarded with in the 80s. Back to the Future, Peggy Sue Got Married, the 90s, Forrest Gump, never ending boomer nostalgia.
Happy Days.
Right. Yeah. Everything was a revolution for these people.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Everything they did was revolutionary. And thank you, Ken K. Thank you so much for this super chat. Altamont is 4 months after Woodstock. 4 months. Same people behind it did the same dumb shit about moving the festival last minute.
Fucking Hell's Angels, a security guard.
Yeah, let's get the Hell's Angels. That's not
What
going
a
to be a
dumbass
problem.
idea.
Like I look at 99 and the music of that era, and I'm like, to your point, because I said the almost verbatim the same thing in my article for Sublation magazine. Limp Bizkit and Korn, they did festivals around the same size, if not bigger, on their own, and none of this stuff ever happened.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, they weren't multi-day festivals like Woodstock was, but why is 99 so different? And I think
those other festivals are they're executed better, like they're organized,
and they were one day. You know, Woodstock, like, dude, we can do a weekend. We found out how to lock these motherfuckers in.
But you know what? Those documentaries, ICP did an interesting interview on the Pauly Shore podcast, and they were interviewed for like hours. I can't remember if it was the Netflix one or the HBO one, and they didn't use a single minute of ICP's interview. And Violent J said it's because we just talked about how fucking great of a time we had. Like they were looking for ICP to come on and just shit on the experience and say how terrible it was, but like for ICP, they're like, this is the most fans we ever played in front of. People were going nuts. Like we love Woodstock 99, and that wasn't fitting the story that they wanted to tell at that documentary, so they didn't use any of the footage.
That's fucking sucks, because if you go back and watch it, and I think you can find it on YouTube.
You can.
Most of the performances, people are having a ball.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the ICP show, like they have like pro wrestling gimmicks in it. Like they power bomb this dude who's, I think it's Colt Cabana actually. He's like dressed as a cop, and people are fucking going into it. And then they sing the song "Fuck the World" at Woodstock 99, and there's a line in "Fuck the World" that's like, it's "Fuck Palooza and big festivals. We never sell out for you bitch ass hoes." And that's, you know, they're singing that at Woodstock.
And Woodstock. That's the OK Festival, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, there's I don't know. I've never dug the whole we're going to blame this genre of music and these young people that dig this genre of music because they're the problem. It was this genre alone. It's Rage Against the Machine alone, and Limp Bizkit. Or they didn't. Rage Against doesn't even get blamed, or Red Hot Chili Peppers, but it's definitely everyone wants to blame Limp Bizkit. And
Rage is like an acclaimed intellectual band, whereas Limp Bizkit, you know, they're proud sellouts who, you know, people like to shit on.
I mean, the best thing about the documentary is they say as they're stealing the merchandise out of the merch trailers, they're yelling, "Fuck you, I won't do what you tell me."
Yeah, and Rage Against the Machine burned a flag while they played the song "Killing in the Name of" at that point. Like, but that's not in, like, the documentary is all like Fred Durst got up there and he was really angry.
The uncomfortable thing you have to deal with in that conversation for a lot of music journos, I don't know if you agree with this, is you have to say that a lot of what Rage did was performative and they played up to an audience. The repetitive nature of "fuck you, I won't do what you tell me," regardless of what the song is about, it really does sound like "fuck you, mom." There's a reason why they were able to tour with those bands. There's a reason why they were able to they sold millions of records, not because everyone's a communist. They sold millions of records.
And those songs are in video games and commercials and all sorts of shit.
It sounds like "fuck you, mom." If you listen to that song and you're like, "This is Fuck the Man," cool. But you know what a lot of people heard? "Fuck you, mom." And it's not about it's like, that's what that song sounds like. I didn't listen to Rage Against the Machine for hella long because I was like, who is this "Fuck You, Mom" band? I'm not digging this shit.
Well, I like Rage, but I'm just imagining my mom listening to me as like a mouthy 10-year-old, and she's just seeing Rage Against the Machine when I'm being a little shit. That's what she sees.
Yeah, someone said Billy Corrigan recently interviewed Tom Morello. Yeah, but that's two guys from that scene that are going to tell very good stories about one another and their place in time and how they just don't understand Woodstock 99. Like, come on, dude. You wrote anthems of rebellion regardless of the iconography on stage. I mean, these guys had fucking Shining Path in videos. Nobody knew who the fuck that was or cared. They just knew that you were throwing a middle finger to the man. And this is a moment, because of financial deregulation, that a lot of people are able to move out of bad neighborhoods in the urban core into the suburbs. Malls are starting to get built out in the 90s. So when this music is hitting, it's really taken over the suburbs. That's where a lot of people are moving to. To me, that's another reason why it's so eclectic, because you do have this urban mix in the suburbs around this same time, right? You talk about Hot Topic juggalos.
Yeah.
And we should talk about the juggalos also, because you are a juggalo fan. Tell us a little bit about ICP.
So I'm down with the clowns. I got into ICP in the 90s because my buddy's much older friend, who was definitely tripping on meth most of the time, introduced us to them. We were like 8 years old probably at the time, or 9 years old. And he would just be like, we would try to stay up late, and he would just always be up. And, you know, so it'd be like 4 a.m. Here, you guys want to see what the Great Malenko? What the fuck is this? You know, and we thought this is so like fun and zany and like just kind of weird, and we really dug it. And what I've always found interesting about ICP, I don't like follow them the way I did as a kid, but I still have an appreciation for them. So this isn't ironic. Like I fucking love Great Malenko. I love Amazing Jekyll Brothers from the 90s. I don't even know what their last album is though right now. They have done such a crazy job of getting their fans to buy into their outsider status, like this us versus them mentality, like fuck the world, like their song like that. That's they've built like almost like a religious like following, and other bands have done this before, obviously like the Deadheads and many others, but ICP just like has such an interesting community that the music doesn't really matter that much. Like what's more interesting is the sense of belonging that juggalos feel being around each other, just being in a group of people where everyone's convinced society has it out for them.
I thought your love letter to ICP in that chapter. No, and I say that in all sincerity because it was actually a really beautiful chapter. We were talking about this off air. I was just hurt you didn't mention Kiss. So, because to me, Kiss is the band that does that before them, that actually gives them the model. They have the model and the procedure. We put the makeup on like this. We do these kind of whatever rocky rap songs like this, and we tell people that it's us against the world like that. And maybe we can make a couple bucks off this. They get to go a different route because they get into beefs with like Eminem. That's when I first heard about Insane Clown Posse, was their Eminem beef.
So ICP, that is a clear comparison. And yeah, again, I probably should have mentioned Kiss there because they have that following. But I think Kiss's following was much broader and more diluted. Like there's a lot of very casual Kiss fans. They're selling millions and millions of records for decades. Like, think about the song like I Want to Rock and Roll All Night. Like ICP doesn't have anything like that. ICP is like a cult version of Kiss. Like it's a more specialized,
yes.
Kiss is like, if Kiss is like the Catholic Church, like ICP is like some like, SSPX sect that broke off that like has 1/10 of the fucking people in it.
I like the Grateful Dead analogy because in the warehouse I lived in West Oakland, actually one of the guys that worked for years for the Grateful Dead was there. So I got to hear a ton of very interesting Grateful Dead stories over the years. And also we had a bunch of the jam bands would record in the back there too, like kind of famous ones. And I found that interesting that they all tried to follow the Dead's model of having people follow them.
Hard to replicate.
It really is hard to replicate. You need a media infrastructure to do stuff like that creates mythology around you. And I think the greatest thing and you talk about this in the book, the greatest thing for ICP was the government involvement. This is a gang.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I want to mention one more point about Kiss though.
Yeah.
ICP dislikes the comparison to Kiss. They have a lyric where it's fuck Gene Simmons, you make me sick. Psycho Circus, you just stole my shit. Spit your blood out and do your dance. I'm gonna kick that ass through your leather pants. So Violent J is not a fan of Kiss, even though just based on appearances, they're clearly they're doing some heavy borrowing.
But also, Kiss are the sellouts, right?
Yeah,
you can buy a Kiss coffin.
Well, you can buy anything ICP. I mean,
I'm sure they have their own coffin, but it's all in how you market it, right?
ICP is independent though. Like they're Psychopathic Records. They're doing all this shit themselves.
They are, and they've done a lot, and they've actually helped catapult certain careers. There's certain rappers that have done the Gathering of the Juggalos that said that there's a perform in front of a ton of people. People really dug it. I have friends that have went to they just wanted to go see it for themselves to see how crazy it was. And they've said, oh, people are really nice there. It's a lot of fun. And you write about this in the book.
Yeah. So I've gone to a few ICP shows, and like the last one I went to was in Brooklyn. A complete stranger gave me a ride at home at like 2 a.m. and I was like way away from home. Like I would have had to take 2 subway transfers. It would have took me over 2 hours, and an Uber would probably been like, well, it probably would have been $70 then, and probably like over $100 now. Prices have increased so much, and I just didn't feel like I'm just gonna get kicked in the balls and be on public transit, all night in the middle of the night in Brooklyn, and then go to work the next day. And this dude gave me a fucking ride home. But the weirdest thing was, he said he was a real estate agent and he was showing a house in my area. Like it's fucking 2 a.m. Who was looking at real estate? Like if you just want to hang out, that's cool. If you're buying drugs, that's cool. But like showing a house, that's weird, man. But I wanted the rides, and we had a good conversation, and I never saw him again.
Someone says Grammy Award-winning artist Jason Miles calling Kiss sellouts. Damn. Someone mistake. I don't know how it came up in a Google search. I was interviewed a few months ago, and someone goes, "I didn't know this. You won a Grammy?" I was like, "I did not." But if this is a lie you want to, like if this is a lie you want to tell, tell it. It sounds cool. Maybe someone will fuck me now. I don't know.
And your penis is 12 inches long, 3 inches thick.
You can really hammer an 8-inch spike through a board with it. I didn't write any of that on the Wikipedia page. Not at all.
You have some nice editors.
In closing, because I've had you here for over an hour, and I know there's sleepy children around you. Tell us about the year 99 in closing, and what has 99 brought us here in 2025.
Well, so in the late 90s, all of this trashy pop culture that we talked about emerged in part to media deregulation and technological advancement. So, media conglomerates were just getting bigger due to elimination of restrictions in ownership. And to produce profitable content, they chose to drag standards down. You talked about this a little earlier with like the cut in news reporting. Well, they produced a lot of reality TV and fucking pro wrestling and talk shows. Even the world's biggest conglomerates got involved in porn in some indirect ways, in many ways. So you had trashy culture reach new levels of popularity and influence. And I think that's still with us today. So like the Jerry Springer being in the White House sort of thing, all the kayfabe that we get in our society that was really popularized in the 90s, even though wrestling was around for a long time, it really reached a peak in the 90s. The scapegoating of video games lives on in new ways now when we're scapegoating social media apps. So I just find that the aspects of pop culture that we mock the most actually influence our world in a lot of ways that we don't appreciate at the time.
Wherever you guys are watching or listening to the show, there's a link in the description to get this man's book. It is a page turner. It's a lot of fun. We didn't even talk about Beanie Babies and the stock market crash. There's so much more in the book. There's a whole chapter on porn. I learned a few things in there about, I didn't know porn gave us cookies and all this other stuff. So please, wherever you're watching, listen to the show, it's before I even write the description of the show, there's a link for Ross's book. Ross, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. I hope I can bring you back on. We'll have another fun pop culture conversation.
Oh yeah, I'd be down for that for sure.
All right. Well, have a good night, and tell the family I said thank you for letting us borrow you.
Hopefully the baby keeps sleeping.
Thank you, Ross. I booked this like 2 months ago. He's a busy beaver. This guy writes in huge magazines. This is a really good book. Enough. And I'll ask Ross before he closes his screen if he wants to join us for movie night. I'll send him the link because we're going to watch a ninja movie. We're going to watch the first ninja movie, Enter the Ninja. It's going to be fun. We get to watch it together. I will be pausing it so we can talk a little shit in between the movie. Oh, we're going to have so much fun. There's only one way to enjoy this. There's 2 ways to enjoy it. Become a paid YouTube subscriber. Just click the join. The link's already there. Become a patron. There's a link in the description for that. Click it. The link's already there. So if you're a patron, go to Patreon, the link's up, click it. So let's get in the room. Let's watch this movie. We're going to be watching it with a few other channels. Burgess's channel is coming. Varn's channel is coming.
We're coming for you.
Don't say it. Thank you, guys. And I am out. See you soon. Wrong one. See you soon.